The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Alethia. I'm your host, Alethia O'Hara-Stephenson. On each episode, I sit down with incredible guests from our community. These guests are inspiring, they have empowering stories to share, and of course, a bit of education. On this episode, I am honored to have the incredible Marcia Murdock with me. Marcia has spent over 20 years in the youth justice community. She has been advocating for youth and adults during this time. She's also a mom of 3 incredible children who have grown up to do inspiring things in their own ways. She's also an author. She's a DEI advocate, diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate, and of course, a champion for our community. It is my honor to have Marcia on the show. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you, Alethia. It's nice to be here.
Awesome. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
Good stuff. So I touched on the fact that you're an author, but before we dive into you being an author, can you share a little bit about what a youth justice worker is? What is that?
Well, it's a lot of things, actually. It depends on how you view the work. I view the work as giving kids, in particular, a chance to learn about themselves, to explore their strengths, to even recognize that they do have strengths and build on those. And then, so therefore, once they're back in the community, they can be, positive contributors to their community. So a lot of our kids don't know that they have strengths, and they're always told that, the bad things about and what they're doing wrong and but they don't often hear what they're doing right or what they're capable of. So for me, regardless of their choices and where they are, it's about telling them that this is a bump in the road. And this isn't your life, and you have so much more to live for and so much more to contribute to the community. So let's work on those pieces.
I love that. And, oftentimes our youth are so saddled down with all of the negative stories that they've been told about themselves, about their peers. And so having that positive role model and reinforcement is so critical for them to be able to move beyond whatever their circumstances is in that moment.
Exactly. I think we get caught up a lot with the punishment aspect of it. When it comes to youth, it's not about the punishment. It's about the accountability, be holding them accountable for their choices, but also letting them know that there's other things out there and there's better things out there and there's better ways to make choices, because we also have to remember that they're still developing. Their brains are still developing, right? And they just make decisions on a whim. A split-second decision can mean years of their life, depending on what that decision is. And they're so susceptible to all the different negative polls that are out there in that community and on the TV and on the radio and all those things. And their brains can't absorb all of that. And if you're throwing negative things at them as well, when do they have time to look at the positives?
That's so true. And when you think about our young people, and you touched on this, they're often, influenced by the world around them, and that one mistake, if they don't have someone to steer them in the right direction, that one mistake could potentially cost them their entire life, right? So when you think about it, it has an impact on your future career aspirations, educational aspirations. Travel, exactly.
Everything.
So many things that we take for granted. So it's important, the work that you're doing. Now, I'm curious, how did you get involved in that field?
It was actually by accident.
Okay.
It was actually by accident. I've always been interested in the law. Always. I wanted to be a police officer. My mom wasn't having that. I wanted to be a lawyer, so that was my goal, to be a lawyer. So I actually started taking some courses, and I was doing advocacy. And part of my advocacy course was to do volunteer work. So I started volunteering at a facility for men, incarcerated men, and the volunteer coordinator said to me, this comes natural to you. Why don't you think about, doing this as a career? And I never really thought about it. So she said, I'm going to make some calls. And next thing I was getting a phone call telling me that I needed to come in for an interview. And so I worked with males for a couple of years. I worked with female adults for a couple of years. And then I transitioned to youth, and that was my niche. And I've been there ever since.
Amazing. Yeah. And now you've been working with youth for
almost 30 years.
Almost 30 years. Wow. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you have gained some really incredible perspective during that period of time. But when you think about the environment that we're in now and the climate that we're in, why is it so important to have this role, that youth advocacy role?
I think I touched on it a little bit before. There's so much negativity out there, and you watch the news, you listen to the radio, you don't hear any of the good stuff.
Yes.
It's always the bad stuff, It's always about a shooting here or a mishap here or this, but there's never a good news story. So if this is what you're feeding our kids whose brains are developing, this is what they're going to see. And this is what this is how they're going to view things, right? Everything out there is bad. I have to protect myself, or even that aspect of not even going out, right? That impacts them as well. We can't say lock your kids in the house. We can't say don't leave the house, but we need to make sure that they're prepared for what's out there when they do get out, but not just the negative. We also have to prepare them that there is good stuff out there, and there's good that you can do if that's the way you go, right? A lot of it is about what they see, what they hear, their environment, the way they've grown up. A lot of it has to do with that as well, and opportunities, lack thereof.
Right. And you kind of alluded to this a little bit as well. It's not so much, it doesn't necessarily reflect on the community. So it doesn't matter if you are from a poor neighborhood or a rich neighborhood or from the Black community, the white community. Anyone, you could be well educated, right? And that just one tiny mistake could cost you.
Exactly.
And puts you on the wrong path.
Yes, I've worked with kids from every community. I've worked with kids of judges, kids of police officers, kids that have grown up in those neighborhoods, kids that parents have a lot of money. But again, a kid's mind is a kid's mind, and it's not always reflective of the parents, and it's not always reflective of the community, because as I say that we're kids, we are not a true reflection of our kids, and our kids are not a true reflection of us. It's powerful. More so the propensity of the human brain to make decisions, sometimes without the benefit of knowledge and on consequences. And that's where our kids are. They just do things on the whim. They don't think about the consequence. They don't think, well, if I do this, this might happen. No, they just say, you know what, that looks good, I'm going to go do it. Or my friend is doing it, or he wants me to do it, I'm going to go do it, right? And then later on, now you say, okay, there's a consequence to that choice, right? And they may not even know as well, right? We deal with kids as young as 12.
Oh my goodness.
What does think of a 12-year, think of when you were 12, right? How much did you know about the world and how it operated, right? But yet we're incarcerating kids that are 12. And we have kids that are on probation, or we have kids that are involved in the justice system in any faculty, not just incarceration.
And without this role, imagine that 12-year-old, their life could be on the downhill from that moment on without someone like you in that role. That's incredibly powerful. The other thing that you touched on that I find also powerful, as adults, we often tend to put on that, to start judging. Right, because you see a child and they're in trouble with the law, and you automatically, start to point the finger and find fault and blame and start to judge that child, judge the family, judge the community. But it's more than that.
It's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than that. And I think one of the things that we had spoken about prior to this was some of the barriers that I face in this work. And I think that is one of the barriers. One of the largest barriers is the perspective, right? It's the perspective of others, how they see the kids, how they see their families, how they see the communities that they grow up in. They don't look at all the challenges and all the other things that came. They don't know the backstory. Some of these kids, they may be 14 or 15, but they're the ones that are running the household. They have 3 other siblings that they're taking care of. Mom's working 3 jobs, to support the family, or dad's working 3 jobs to support the family. And this 14-year-old is the one that's left home with their little one to, their little brother or sister to hold the house together.
Oh my goodness.
Or mom has her own issues, and therefore this 14-year-old is the one now responsible for bringing in the money. Well, how does a 14-year-old get money? Right? What they know and what they see when they open their doors in certain communities, that's how they get the money, right? So if you don't teach them another way, then they go to what they see and what is in front of them all the time.
I love that. You touched on challenges and barriers. What other challenges and barriers have you come across in your 30-plus year career, other than that stereotype that adults would often put on these children?
I think representation. Over-representation when we talk about involvement in the justice system, as well as those that are working in the justice system are not necessarily reflective of those that they're servicing. So therefore, the education piece isn't there, the connection piece isn't there, the historical piece isn't there, the cultural piece isn't there all the time. So that's always been something that we struggle with, trying to get, as we always say, the right people at the table.
Absolutely.
Right? The right people with the right views on things and doing the work for the right reason.
Yeah.
Regardless of what that work may be. That work may just be, an outreach worker that's in the community, right? Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because it pays well, or are you doing this because you're really interested in making this community a better place for everyone?
Yes, you need to be invested in the community, invested in the young people.
If you wouldn't do the job for free, then you shouldn't be doing it. When it comes to service. If you wouldn't do that job for free, then you're doing it for the wrong reason.
Wow, your heart absolutely has to be in it.
Yes.
For the children. Oh my gosh. Now, you have also penned a book called Beyond the Shame, A Mother's Journey to Healing. And this book tells a little bit about your story and your journey. Can you talk a little bit about that book?
Well, the book was as I say, a journey, as part of the title says. It was a journey for me. It was a journey to learn about myself. It was a journey to learn about others. It was a journey from insanity, to be honest. And it was an awakening. It was an awakening for me because as we talk about my history with working in the justice system or with kids involved in the justice system, I never ever thought I was immune to that.
Right.
I was the super mom. I was the strong one. I was doing everything right. I was raising the perfect children. I had the perfect job. I, lived in the perfect community. I had the perfect house. Everything was all hunky-dory until the phone rings. And then the phone rings and it's a police officer on the other end telling you that they have your child. And that, he's been charged with this, and that. And what do you do then? As a mother, what do you do then? But on the other flip side, as a youth justice worker, someone who works in the system, who should know the system and should know the signs, what do you do then?
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
You blame yourself.
Of course.
Right? You blame yourself, and then with the blame comes the shame and the hiding and the depression and all of those pieces. So that's what my book is about. My book was about trying to get me back on the steady and also helping others who are going through the same thing.
Wow.
To get past that, beyond the
shame.
Yeah.
On that note, we're going to take a short break. Beyond the Shame, A Mother's Journey to Healing.
In front of the bars.
And in front of the bars. That is important. And we talked about the fact that it doesn't matter your community, it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter your education status, right? A child can be influenced by the wrong circle. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with In Conversation with Alethia with Marcia Murdock.
Like movies? You know I do. That's why I see all of them. And if you want to know which ones you should see too, check out the latest Cinema Scene reviews and interviews. They're hot, fresh, and delicious, and they're online at rogerstv.com/cinemascene, popcorn not included. This offer is available everywhere. Tell your friends, be the first on your block to click rogerstv.com/cinemascene. It's so nice, we have to mention it twice.
You're watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back to In Conversation with Alethia. I am here in the studio with Marcia Murdock, and we're talking about Beyond the Shame, a mother's journey in front of the bars. Again, in front of the bars as opposed to behind the bars. So we're discussing the book, and the book talks about her journey, having to support her children, 2 sons actually, right, who were caught up in the justice system. And the shame of being that mom who has spent an entire lifetime advocating for children, fighting for children, and now having to put the spotlight essentially on your own life, your own family, despite creating that perfect family, that perfect home, that perfect environment for your children to thrive. How did you live through that moment, or those moments, having to put the spotlight on your own life?
Day by day. Day by day. It was difficult. It impacted all sides of my life, because I also had another child that was also in need of support.
Right.
That wasn't involved with the justice system at all. But it's my eldest son that gave me the longest ride, let's just say, or the biggest challenge. And I blamed myself. A lot of it was blame, where I was digging to see where I could have done something different, digging to see where I went wrong, what decision I made that was wrong, what signs did I miss, was I working too hard and so busy raising other people's children and ignoring my own.
Yes.
Was I doing that? Was I just a failure? It was. These were the questions that I had to keep pushing back and saying, no, I've done this and I've done this part and I've done that part, but you don't get to that point. You have to you have to wallow in the bottom first before you can see the light above you. And this was years ago, but to this day, I still question myself sometimes.
Wow.
I still question whether I did a good job, even though that part of his life is over and he's moved on and he's doing quite well. Why did he get there in the first place,
Yes.
right? And
Yep.
that has to be me, doesn't it? And so I second guess myself now sometimes when I'm even speaking with the kids that I work with. I'm second guessing myself sometimes. Okay, are you the right person to be even talking to them about this, given that you failed your own son? But my son has told me over and over, Mom, it wasn't you.
Yeah.
You gave me everything I needed. You gave me a foundation. You taught me right from wrong. I'm the one that made the choice.
Right.
I made that choice. But still, you question yourself, right?
And I think as a mom, we will always do that.
Yes.
Moms will always, find the fault in themselves and wear the guilt.
Yeah, because your job is to protect your children, right? And to
Absolutely.
make them into the best person that they can be. But we have to realize that at a point, we no longer have that ability to mold them.
Yes.
Right? We can only mold them so far and only give them certain tools, but they have to be the ones to be able to use them. But Absolutely. I say that now. I say that now with great confidence, but
in that moment.
And not just that moment, it took me years to get here. So anyone that's struggling with anything like this, any life-changing incident that's happened in your life, whether it's your kids involved in the justice system or a death of a partner or whatever that may be, know that it's a journey.
Yes.
And the journey takes longer for some than others. And you're going to go forward and then you're going to fall 10 steps back. But the key is to just keep going and make sure you have those people around you that will help you to keep going, and don't be afraid to ask and talk about it. It took me a long time before I could talk about it. It wasn't until my son said, Mom, do it. Other people need to hear it. other mothers out there, other fathers out there, other kids out there need to hear what their parents have gone through or their moms have gone through, raising them only for this to happen.
And I think it was your son who gave you the courage and the idea to actually put pen to paper and write this book. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was my son that gave me the courage to publish the book.
Wow.
I wrote the book as therapy for myself, but it was only for myself. And I got to a certain part where I was talking about being a single mom and having a child in my 20s, and I wanted my son to know that story, right? So I started reading those pieces to him, and he knew that I had him when he was young, and because we grew up as basically brother and sister kind of thing, but he knew that part. But how I got there and the struggles with him, as a single mom when he's an infant and, all those pieces, he didn't know about that. So when I started reading him that, he was just,
wow.
He was like, this is what you went through to get me here. And he says, Mom, you gotta let people know, you gotta publish this.
Yes.
And I'm like, publish? I said, publish? I said,
It's a powerful tool for healing.
It's not just my story though, but it's his,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
It was his. I said, it's more so your story than mine. You really want me, and he said, yeah. He said, yeah, you go ahead. He says, there's mothers out there with kids just like me who did, probably worse than what I did. And they're trying to find their way too. So go for it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That took a lot of courage, and I am proud of him for giving you the courage to actually publish this book. And I've read it, I think, the third read now, and each time I pick up the book, I find another piece of nugget that has made me emotional and shed tears. Let's be honest, right? I've shed a few tears reading this book because it's so powerful. And another element of the book that you touched on that is often not talked about, especially in our Black communities, is mental health. Right, and you talked openly about your own struggles with depression and finding that help. How did you manage to actually pick up the phone and reach out to someone to say, I need help?
I hit rock bottom. I hit rock bottom. As I mentioned, I was in my early 20s when I had my son, and I struggled a lot. I raised him by myself, and there just came a time where I was crying all the time, and I didn't know why I was crying. I would just be in the middle of a conversation, I'd be crying. I'd be sitting at the table eating cereal with him, and I'm crying in my cereal. And I couldn't wait for him to go to bed. I couldn't wait for him to go to bed. Not that I wanted to get rid of him, but because I wanted to cry and not let him see me crying. And one day I just found myself in a puddle on the floor in the kitchen, and I was done. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't want to be here, and I just didn't know what else to do. So I called one of my sisters, and she could barely make out a word that I was saying from all the blubbering that I was doing on the phone. And she's actually the one that called an ambulance for me. So I ended up in the hospital. I was there for several weeks as an inpatient in their mental health unit, suffering from severe depression.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't my own, it wasn't of my own validity that I got the help. It was just hitting rock bottom. But that was in my 20s, and once you suffer depression, it's something that you always have to watch. It's something you always struggling. So you can't say I was depressed.
Right.
You say I struggle with depression, because at any time it'll hit you.
Okay, that's
anytime it'll hit you. And I write in my book that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be sad once in a while, but you need to know when sad is just not sad. It's something else.
And I love that you touched on that, because again, as a community, there's this notion of a strong Black woman, right? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being strong, but that doesn't mean that you should suffer through the pain, suffer through the depression. So recognize those symptoms and reach out.
And that's the thing. The hardest part is recognizing it, because we were always told, as especially as Caribbean women, it's like, you know what, just you're fine. You're fine. You'll get over it. You know what? Stop crying. Stop. Wipe your tears and go back to whatever you were doing. Right. And so that's what's embedded in us. So when you can't stop the tears, then what do? Right. When the tears just come out of nowhere and you don't know why, what do you do? So you have to talk. And that was the one. It took me, I think, 4 days while I was in the hospital before I actually decided to speak.
Wow.
Decided, because I was not allowed to speak about those kinds of things, because I am supposed to be this strong black woman who's raising a son. And I was to have everything perfect. And how dare you ask me why things aren't perfect, or get me to admit that things aren't perfect. That's not gonna happen. It took me almost 4 days before I actually started talking to anyone. But it wasn't until then that you felt that, okay, you know what? It is okay to not be perfect. It is okay to not always have the answers. It is okay not to do certain things right. And it's okay to cry.
Yes, absolutely. It is okay to cry. And this is the same message for our black boys as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
You know, it's the tendency to be strong. It's okay to cry.
Yeah. And
There's
the
no
important
shame
thing
in
is
that.
the important thing is talking, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be professional. It could be a sibling, it could be a friend, it could be a pastor, it could be a minister, it could be anybody that you know will listen, and listen without judgment. That's the key.
Yes.
You know, that's what it's about. And I know the professional part of it is something that we still have to work towards.
Yes.
But just speaking to a friend or a colleague or somebody, because it's until you start to talk and you hear it coming out of your own mouth, you don't recognize it. When you internalize it, it's there. But when it comes out, then you got to do something.
And this is the one small step in breaking down the stigma of mental health in our community.
Exactly.
Absolutely
It's
powerful.
okay to be sad, and it's okay to not have everything right.
Okay.
And you have to continue to tell yourself that. Yes, you're beautiful. Yes, you're strong. Yes, you're this. But you know what? It's also okay to get up and say, oh my God, today is going to be one of those days.
Yeah.
As long as one of those days doesn't last a week. You know?
Okay. I love that. Now, we've touched on the book, we've touched on your journey in youth justice. What message would you want anyone who's listening today to take away from either reading the book or from this show? It's a tough question, I know.
Yeah, that's I don't know. Strength.
Ah, okay.
Recognizing that everybody has a strength. It may not be the same as your brother or your sister or your husband or your wife or you know, but you have your own, and it's inner, and you have to recognize that and pull that out and make that be the best of you.
I love that.
I know.
Everyone
and no
is
matter where
unique.
you are, you can. It's always, as I tell my kids all the time, this is a bump in the road. So whatever bad situation it is, it's not going to last forever. It's a bump in the road. You just keep on going.
I love that.
And drag others with you. When you get the positive, you bring those that are struggling with you.
I love that. On that note, it's a bump in the road. There's more to come. Thank you so much, Marcia, for joining me on In Conversation with Alethia. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Awesome. Until next time, join us for another episode of In Conversation with Alethia.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
Your mouth can do a lot of amazing things.